Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights. Thanks sponsors, Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, ComC.com, Burbank Sports Cards, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Heritage Auctions, Hugs and Scott Auctions, Topps, Panini, and Upper Deck. I saw the news that PSA was buying the software company Genamint in order to bring AI to the grading process. Shout out to Rich Miller. Daily newsletter is talking about artificial intelligence, AI, in grading. I'm reading about this Genamint company that PSA has bought, and in my competitive instinct, I'm thinking, should BGS have bought that? Or are they already doing some of these things or having things in the works? I think all the grading companies are thinking about AI and how to use it, not as the be-all and end-all, but as part of the process. And I think they may each be doing more than what they're letting on. But Nat Turner, having a software background, not a big surprise. They've got deep pockets. The other thing I would say is when I was the boss and the owner, 3 times we bought a company where there were ulterior motives. In 2 of the cases, we wanted the people involved, and we thought it's simpler just to buy the company, and then we'll get the people to come and work on our team. And a couple of them, we liked the process, and in a couple, we liked the potential for expansion and the fit it would have within our thing. So I think all those boxes are checked for PSA, is that they're bringing in the group, they want the talent, they can leverage that talent. So I'm looking forward to seeing the rising tide is going to raise all the boats. If PSA does better, that's going to be good for our industry. So I'd like for BGS to do well as befits my last name. Okay, so with AI being part of the process, I think everybody can see that that is a direction it needs to be going. And so why am I just making this an episode about edges? I don't want to look at the whole grading scene right now. I just want to talk about the difficulty of grading and the artificial intelligence, the I letter, intelligence. It has to be smart about it, and it has to learn, and it will learn. There'll be an automated aspect of this, but there are so many exceptions. So I just wanted to pick edges and say that when you do centering and corners and edges and surface, there's nothing in there about the size of the card. That's not C, C, E, or S, but if you measure the card and it doesn't measure out, if it's too small, which would be potential evidence of trimming, then it's going to get an authentic if it has been altered. The problem is there are cards, and the computer doesn't know this going in, but it could learn this, is that there are some sets that are known to have a lot of variation in the sizing of the card based on more primitive card sheet cutting mechanisms. The T206s for sure. 55 Bowman's another good example. The problem will be, as we get more mechanized and automated, is that if a card is undersized, again, this is part of buying the card, not the holder. It may be in a holder, but if you want to crack it out and try another, if it's undersized, it may not pass muster. If it's undersized, it may have been okay to the naked eye, to the person's eye, because it's within tolerances. But if it's slightly undersized, it's liable to get bounced by the computer. But how would they do that? When they're doing that, they could lay the card down flat and take a picture of it, a photo, a scan. And there are technologies that will have the calibration to know exactly to the micrometer. That's an exaggeration, but they're going to know to great exactitude what the dimensions are, that it's exactly 2.5 by 3.5 or slightly more. The problem is, if one of them is slightly more, then the way the registration is on the card sheet is that then the next one might be slightly less, because you've got 11 cards going one way and 12 the other way. And so they need to be cut out because they're full bleed sometimes with no borders, or the borders need to be cut. It's not done by hand, it's done by machine. So they all need to be exactly 2.5 by 3.5, but exactly is relative when you're dealing with an atomic kind of a microscope. Okay, so what's the edge have to do with that? It's hard to look at the edge from a scan. Are you going to scan the edge? If you do, then how do you do that? I guess you could stand up the card and you could shoot all 4 edges of it, but that's a lot of handling. I guess a robot at some point in the future could do that, but what are you looking for with the edges? Okay, you've already determined from the flat scan that the card does measure up. And what if it's perfect centering? Okay, I'm not naturally suspicious, but I've learned to ask questions. If something is perfectly centered, then I'd want to look at the edges and make sure the computer can do this, that they're straight, that they're not wavy, and that there's a 90-degree angle. If one of them is 89 degrees, then the adjacent card on the sheet above it is 91. It has to average out it to these right angles. So if the edges are straight and the angles are 90 degrees, then I still want to look at the edges. I know how to do that as a person. I've detected counterfeits by feeling the edges, observing the edges and seeing, like Sesame Street, one of these is not like the other. You see wear, and not discoloration, but it's been handled on 3 sides, and the 4th side is razor sharp. In fact, if it's razor sharp, that's another problem, because depending on the era of the card production and the manufacturer, the era, the different sets, there were different technologies in the cutting. Some were the guillotine with a blade, some were laser. And so you shouldn't expect to get the upper deck cut, which is very smooth, with an OPSA card, which is way more rough cut, especially back in the old days. And so that would be a red flag. Does the computer know that? Again, with artificial intelligence, the computer really doesn't know anything until you help it learn that. So if it messes up the one time, then you program it or you inform it in its hardware, software, whatever, that here's an exception to that rule. Here's something to take into account. And so over time, that's why it's artificial intelligence. It's going to get better. It's going to miss some things at first. That's why there'll absolutely be human oversight. When the cards are cut, they're stacked up in sheets, and the sheets are all on top of each other, and they're all uniform size. They have registration marks, and they're all put together, and then they're chopped. But if even one thing is out of place, like they always talk about card sheets, if something was in the upper left corner, the upper right corner, one of the corners of the sheet, that's where things can get off. They can get dinged if it's in the corner, and it could be, again, if the calibration is not exact, it could be off center. Or again, people wonder, how could this not get a 10? It's a brand new card. It could not get a 10 if it's rough cut, or if it's not centered, or if something happens in the pack. So this Genamint company, I think they're happy, and I think PSA's happy. I'm not sure if BGS and SGC are happy, but again, this is something that's going to happen. And anything that streamlines the process and tells the graders what to look for. If this software can do a quick diagnostic, and like I said, I'm not saying that these other companies don't already have something along those lines, but as the technology improves, it's going to help the expert graders know what to look for and where to be careful, where to give additional scrutiny. And like I said, if something comes out too good to be true, is not true sometimes. In cards, there are 10s, there are 9.5s, but even brand new cards sometimes aren't. So if a computer can help describe what it is and show what to look for, the other part of artificial intelligence is to know over time, you're going to have a big data set to see where are the problems. Where is the computer having an opinion that is overruled by the expert? What are the sets that are having the biggest problems? That's one of the things I've talked about with Jeremy and the BGS guys, is that there just are certain cards that need more than one pair of eyes. And I believe they're doing that. They need a triple check on some cards that are trickier. But some of the base cards that are very mundane shouldn't take as long. That's another argument for why the price of grading could be more for more expensive cards or more obscure cards. Okay, when I did my dinner and talked about which of the centering, corners, edges, and surface is the most important or the least important, I don't think they got to the least important, but everybody thinks centering is important. Some of the guys say if the surface is all scuffed up, that doesn't look good. And if the corners are dinged, but if the edges are a little rough, I don't think that bothers people as much. And yet, I think the computer under a very powerful microscope or something like that is going to be able to magnify to where all these edges are going to look fuzzy. Okay. So if they're probably going to have to magnify it, not so much that they get down to the molecule, they need to magnify it in such a way that they can see that the edge is intact, that it's straight. When people have asked me if something is counterfeit, I want to feel the card. I want to feel the edges. I want to look at the reflection of the card and just see. And then I'd probably want to look at it with a loop to try to see if there's a strange dot pattern on the front or the back. So again, computers can do all that stuff, but I don't think they can do everything because I think they'll make mistakes. And I don't think the hobbyist wants the computer to say, oh, the computer made a mistake. That's no better than a person making a mistake. It's still a mistake. At any rate, I appreciate PSA's market leadership to jump out and say, we're going for it. We're acquiring these guys. And I hope it allows for further improvements in the industry, in the grading process. And if it shaves off some time, it doesn't have to be more accurate. It could just allow the process to be similar. But like I said, edges, you think that's inconsequential. If the edges are too good or one of them is too good, it's one of the red flags I've noticed over the years. That's it for today. Enjoy your hobby. It's what you want to make of it. Here's hoping that this and other topics will allow grading to be more responsive to getting things back this month rather than this year. Again, thanks everybody. Back again tomorrow with another episode.